In this episode, we discuss a potentially controversial and uncomfortable topic, porn. Specifically, porn addiction. Not ones to shy away from having important conversations, we chat with the wonderful Matt Sinkovitz, who helps men end their addiction to watching porn so they can reignite the passion in their marriages and be better role models for their children.
Matt shares his own personal story and offers insights and strategies to help others reach a path of freedom. Matt is doing such incredibly important work, not just for men, but for future generations, and it was such a pleasure to have him on the podcast. Hi, I'm James Davis.
And I'm Claire Davis.
We're the Midlife Mentors, here to lift the lid on how to achieve health and happiness.
The balanced, no-nonsense way.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Midlife Mentors with me, James.
And me, Claire. How are you all today? So we've got a really exciting, we think this is a really exciting topic to talk about today. We've got the lovely Matt Sinkovitz with us today. He's going to be talking to us about his journey into what he's doing now, which is helping support other men to their path to freedom from porn. He's got a community called Porn to Purpose, and we're going to be talking to him a little bit more about that in a minute. But I think one of the main reasons that James and I really, when we were reached out to, Matt reached out to us and we got the request to come on, we were thinking, actually, this would be a really amazing topic. It's potentially a bit out there, which is always good because we're not afraid to talk about the out there topics. And we felt this is important because, you know, we've got a midlife demographic, men and women, but also we've got a lot of people listening that have got teenagers. And obviously with the rise of the digital world where access to porn is so prevalent and so easy to get hold of, this is something that's becoming, in our minds, like a real issue and a real problem. You know, there's a huge rise of porn on the web, and what's happening is, from where we're coming at it, is it's not really portraying a healthy look at relationships. It's not very realistic. There's a lot of pressure to perform, to look a certain way because of this industry of porn and the fact that everyone's got access to it. And, you know, there's a lot of research that's saying many don't know how to relate in relationships anymore and in sexual intimacy because this is their point of reference. So really important topic. And also I just wanted to add in here, I know I'm rambling, but it's also really important to me because I had this in a relationship in my past and it was a real problem and I didn't really speak up about it enough. I didn't do enough about it. We didn't get enough help. I probably wasn't the best person that I could have been around this either. So we don't want other people to go, I don't want other people personally to go down that path that I went down. And this is opening up those channels of communication with the wonderful Matt here right now. So Matt, thank you for being here.
Welcome, Matt.
Claire, James, thanks so much for having me here today. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Oh, bless you. Well, I kind of did a little bit of intro on you at the beginning, but you've been a teacher of personal and spiritual development for over a decade, right? And you're an ordained Buddhist minister and mindfulness counsellor, which is just amazing. But do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey of how you came about to do this Porn to Purpose?
Yes. Thanks so much for the opportunity to share. And yeah, so my journey, let's see where to start it. You know, I'll say that porn was something that was a part of my life from my early teens, probably age 13 or 14, probably a common age for a lot of young men. And it was something that was a part of my life and something that was, I felt a pretty normal part of being a young boy for many years. But it was something that kind of stuck with me, you know, up through my teens, up into my 20s, and even into my 30s. And it was something that I kind of, at one point in my journey, kind of began to recognize was unhealthy for me. And kind of how this all came together for me. You know, I grew up in the Christian church. in the traditional kind of Pentecostal setting. At one point in my journey, I was at church, in my teens, like 4 days a week. I had church service. So I was heavily involved there, heavily involved in youth group. I kind of moved away from church in my late teens and early 20s, kind of began asking some of my own questions and maybe not receiving all the answers that I was looking for. But I found myself in my mid 20s in a very dark, heavy place in my life, very unhappy, really experiencing periods of suicidal thinking, and was just not happy with life and not happy with myself. I was really in a dark place, and it was at this time I kind of had this maybe a point of awakening of sorts, and at that time I began to explore mindfulness, meditation, which ultimately led me to a path in studying and practicing Buddhism. And so I followed that path for many years. It was also around this time I began getting heavily involved in personal and spiritual development. And I ultimately went on to study with my teacher, and ultimately went on to seminary and studied in classical Buddhist studies, and was ultimately ordained as a Buddhist minister and a mindfulness counselor. And also during this time, I was heavily involved in, as I mentioned, personal and spiritual development, working with coaches and mentors, doing a lot of my own work. And I began to feel this call in my own life to be of support and service to others. But porn was still there for me. And it was something for me that I felt was really inhibiting my own journey. It was inhibiting my own spiritual development, and my own development in many aspects of my life. And it was something that I just knew was out of alignment or out of integrity for me. And I was kind of recognizing as I was beginning to move into more leadership. I ultimately went on to do interfaith ministry and chaplaincy work in prisons and hospitals. And as I was kind of moving into that, porn was still had remnants in my life. And I began to recognize that it was just unhealthy for me, and I didn't feel like I was in integrity. And I really felt it was something I needed to get resolved and dealt with in my own life so I could more fully step into service to others with a greater degree of integrity. So I ended up doing what I had always done and hired a coach and got into accountability, got into community around this, and found the path to ultimate freedom in this. So that was kind of my journey. And then when I fully stepped into this coaching work several years ago, it all kind of came together: the personal development, the spiritual development, my journey in porn and around my sexuality, recognizing so many men deal with this, and just kind of feeling called to serve men in their own journeys around this. So that's kind of the summary.
It's absolutely
what an amazing backstory. I love your honesty and vulnerability there. It's really amazing. So thank you so much for sharing all that.
Well, it really opens up the communication channels, doesn't it? It really does, because there is a lot of shame around it as well, right? There's an awful lot of shame around it, and people aren't communicating about it. So
well, I think there's an interesting journey, isn't there? Like, my personally, like you were saying there, when you're a young teenage boy, porn's kind of normal. It's a bit of fun. It's kind of like exploring. But then there becomes a tipping point where later on, as you get older and you're in relationships, it's a bit of an embarrassment almost, and there is shame around it. So and I know that for our listeners, obviously it's a tricky subject, because there's the impact of porn in your own relationship with each other, and also if you have children, how they might be getting into it and picking up on it, and how that could influence them. So pleased we've got you on here, Matt.
Thank you.
Obviously, people do get addicted to porn. Why is that such a bad thing? Which might sound an odd question, but some people would be like, well, so I like porn, so what?
Yep. Yeah, I really do my best to kind of, I have my own opinions about the subject, but I do my best to kind of honor everyone's individual paths. So I run into a lot of people in this work who, whenever we connect, or however the conversation comes up, some people say, hey, you know what? I enjoy porn and it's not an issue for me. And maybe I use it once a month, or oftentimes even women or a man will say, hey, you know what? We use it within our relationship. It's something that's healthy. We enjoy it. It's fun. Oftentimes women say, hey, you know what? I enjoy porn. It's not a problem for me. So I do my best not to just blanket it as a bad thing. I think it does ultimately create problems. And again, I have my own kind of opinions around it. But if one has a healthy relationship with it, generally speaking, then good for you. I'm here to more serve the men that it is problematic for.
Mm.
And I kind of look at it like this, some people can have a couple beers on the weekend and it doesn't turn into a problem for them. But some people, one drink turns into a big problem, and some people have a similar relationship with pornography. Some people can seem to maintain kind of a healthy relationship with it, a moderate relationship with it. It doesn't have this toxic effect. But for some people, it has a really toxic, damaging, kind of destructive effect. And it also turns into a really kind of compulsive, addictive type relationship. So that's kind of what I've seen with it. For some people, it's just really unhealthy and destructive.
It reminds me of a conversation we were having yesterday with a neuroscientist who's also going to be on a podcast. And he was talking about the teenage brains. This is really interesting that we're having this conversation with you now, because he was talking about the teenage brain. And at that point, as teenagers, they might look like adults. They might be shaving. They might be, even at the age where they're having sex. But actually, their teenage brain is still molding and growing. And actually, they're constantly looking for the point of reference. And they're at this point, they're really, really susceptible to addiction, because they are constantly seeking that dopamine hit. And actually, there's loads of research that says that once you've got a dopamine hit, you need more and more and more to get the same result and the same effect, which is the same as alcohol and other addictions. So if you're creating that addiction, which, sadly, from the stuff that we do hear about and see at teenage years, and it is boys and girls, it's not just guys, as you said, creating that sense of normality around porn, and yet wanting more and wanting more and wanting more. You can see how when they get into adult life, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's really this relationship with the brain, with the neurology of the brain,
Yeah.
with the dopamine relationship. And yeah, just like with so many things, oftentimes we need more and more and more to satisfy us, just like a drug addict might need more and more or harder and harder drugs to satisfy them. It's a very similar relationship we see.
So I've actually got a question around that. So moving on to that, it's a bit of a tricky question to ask, but when does it turn from a bit of fun into an addiction, and what defines that addiction? Because you said you have men coming to you that feel like they've got a problem. What's that tipping point? What's that normal tipping point?
Yeah, the point at which we see it beginning to show up as a problem or an addiction in one's life, I would say, is whenever it starts having a negative impact on kind of the key areas of your life. It's affecting relationships, it's affecting work, it's affecting productivity, it's resulting in like maybe long periods of binging and focusing this energy in unhealthy ways. It becomes problematic whenever it creates emotional adverse impacts, feelings of guilt, of shame, of remorse, of regret. That's when we begin to see it problematic. We begin to see it as problematic whenever someone decides they want to quit, but they're unable to quit. They say, you know what, I don't like the way this feels. I don't really like the way I'm showing up in this area. And they make this commitment to stop, but they can't stop, and they continue to return. Or maybe in relationships, Claire, I know you mentioned this had been something that you dealt with in the past. Maybe it's creating secrecy and lying within the relationship, or affecting the intimacy. Maybe the man's going to pornography, but then you're not engaging intimately in the relationship.
Exactly that. That's what happened to me. It was the secrecy, and I tried to be incredibly. It was interesting. This has opened up conversations between James and I, and I look back now, and I wasn't open enough about how it was making me feel, and I wasn't, because I was scared actually of coming across as frigid. So this is from the woman's perspective. I was kind of scared about coming across as not being, every man. I was told every man watches it all the time, and you're frigid, and you shouldn't be stopping me watching it. So I actually adapted my behaviour, and I let him watch it on my laptop. And then I was seeing what he was watching on my laptop. And then the intimacy between us wasn't really there either. So it was creating real issues that ended up not being talked about.
Yeah, that's ultimately what happens. I can't see it being being a healthy
good.
part of a regular relationship, you know?
No, exactly.
Why do you think there's such a rise in the consumption of porn? And they're right, all the figures say that, you know, consumption of porn, I think I've forgotten what billions-dollar industry it is now, but I mean, it's grown massively over the last like 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah, it's really increasing exponentially, I think. And I think there are a couple reasons for that. I would say probably the advent of the internet and
Yes.
high-speed internet in the phone, in the home, and these phones in everyone's hand. I mean, the world is literally at your fingertips. You know, I'm lucky enough to have grown up and for a significant period and most of my youth, you know, my teens into high school, we didn't even have the internet in the house. I remember we didn't get the internet till I was maybe like 16 or 17. It was a big deal in the house. And even then
Yeah.
it was dial up, you know, the old school
Yeah.
AOL stuff. And it just wasn't the same. It was pictures if you could get your hands on anything. So I grew up.
I remember the joy of sitting there, like, listening to the little hum, like, bzzz, and
Exactly.
seeing, like, slowly, pixel by pixel, 20 minutes later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I grew up, and you were lucky if you could get your hands on a Playboy magazine or a videotape or a DVD or something like that. So it was just less accessible, and maybe that was like maybe a healthier era if you want to put it some way. It wasn't, you know, at the touch of a finger available. So I think it became problematic for me, and I think it's become much more problematic today for the young men, especially, and men in general. It's the internet, it's high speed internet, it is the vast amount of pornography that is out there. It's the way, as we talked about earlier, you know, you need more and more and more. You need more graphic, more extreme content to kind of hit those arousal mechanisms. And so the genres become more and more extreme and oftentimes dark and oftentimes violent. And another piece of the puzzle is that, and so you just need more and more and more. Another piece of the puzzle is that kids are getting their hands on it much earlier ages, you know. So I mean, I had a brother reach out to me just yesterday, sharing about how he just recently found his 8-year-old was consuming massive amounts of porn on their home computer and on their phone. So he said, I couldn't believe he was watching a whole day's worth of porn, you know. So and so as we mentioned, you know, and these young minds, they're still these young brains, they're still developing. So kids are getting their hands on it much earlier. And it's also forming, I think, and molding kids' expectations and ideas of sex at a much earlier age. So yeah, really potentially unhealthy and problematic.
I was going to say something there. I was really resonated with me there was about what you're saying about it getting more extreme. So I think if we go back, you know, I'm probably a little bit older than you, but I remember, you know, you were lucky if you go to the woods, you know, and find like an old crumpled magazine or a bush somewhere. You're like, yeah, jackpot. But you know, if we like the films back then, if we look at what we could find, they would look quite kitsch and quite tame compared to what you can find now, you know, a touch of a button on the internet. And I think this is a big problem, right? And controls and regulation around it, stopping, you know, like 8-year-olds finding it.
But it's multi-billion-dollar industry, you know. So actually, people are making a lot of money out of it, and it's becoming normalized, right? So, you know, there should be far more stringent restrictions on all of it, but there isn't. And you know, it's baffling to me because, like you said, we're bringing up. You know, we've not got just men and women of our age. I know you work with men, but, you know, teenagers, we've got a whole swathes of teenagers now where this has been normalized.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what I'm hearing is in the women, the young girls are on the receiving end of this, you know, because the boys, they're being trained almost, you know, sexually through pornography, through really graphic, extreme stuff. And then the girls are thinking, all right, well, this is what's expected of me. And I think it puts young women in really challenging, difficult situations, you know, in terms of what their expectations are.
Well, then you see, you know, a lot of the young girls, you see it all over Instagram as well, right? But I mean, I can imagine that teenage girls then feel like they have to look that way, behave that way, but that, you know, just from appearances themselves. We've got look at what the young girls look like right now, and I sound really old saying this, but you know, it's everything's fake and everything is it's very porn looking, isn't it? The lips, the eyebrows, the boobs, the bum. It's all very I don't know, extravagant and sexualized.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Something that I really emphasize in our community, and something I really feel called to, is helping men like really learn to understand what healthy intimacy, what healthy connection really actually looks like. I think porn has trained us, and it's kind of like, I think it comes from like the adolescent mind, but it's all about the penetration. It's all about the penis. It's all about the vagina. It's all about the ejaculation. It's all about the money shot. And that's how guys are engaging. That's what it's all about. But like love, intimacy, sex, connection, it's so much more than that. But we're all trained. But especially the young minds are being trained to. It's just about, it's just about the penetration. It's just about the act, and there's so much more available, so much more to it,
That's beautiful, beautifully put. So what are some of the common signs? I imagine I imagine if some parents are listening to this, and you mentioned obviously the 8-year-old, your one of your brothers, that's on your program, that said about his 8-year-old child.
I was actually going to split this in two, like, because I think here you got what are the common signs? Is like if you think you might be beginning to have a problem with it, but what are the signs you might be looking out for with your children or your partner?
So I think maybe.
Yeah. Well, I'll start here. I'll start with maybe what are some of the common signs if you're maybe taking a look at this for yourself and saying, is this problematic for me? And I think this could also be used if it's maybe a partner. If maybe you've got a partner that and there's a concern that there may be an issue here. I think first and foremost is we have to look at the direct kind of immediate impact of this. Like, how does porn make you feel? This is an issue that obviously some people might say it makes me feel really good, but I think this is something that you have to be honest with yourself around. But like, does after a porn binge, right after you're done, like, do you feel good about yourself? Do you feel uplifted? Do you feel inspired? Do you feel energized? Do you feel good about the person looking back at you in the mirror? Or do you find that there's kind of a negative or an adverse experience afterward? Do you find that you're emotionally depleted, spiritually depleted, energetically depleted? Do you feel that feelings of guilt, of shame, of regret, of remorse show up? Do you find that you feel a little bit more disconnected? Do you find that you're less intrigued or drawn to intimacy within your relationship? Like, what is, if you're willing to be honest with yourself about the conversation, like, what is the direct or immediate kind of experience after a porn episode, or in the couple days or the couple weeks preceding that? I know for me, it was all those things. I always experienced this emotional, kind of spiritual, oftentimes physical, psychological impact afterwards. And oftentimes my direct or immediate relationships were affected. Also socially, I found myself socially awkward. I find myself disconnected, withdrawn. So again, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to look. If you're able to abstain for a couple days, a couple weeks, maybe even a month, notice how life feels. Notice your energetic state. Notice your spiritual state, and then notice the state immediately after. Like, do you feel good about yourself? Just be honest and do that assessment. Number two, I would say is pornography, as you kind of mentioned, Claire. Is porn something that you have to hide? Is it something that you have to kind of keep secret in your own life? Is it something like, would you feel comfortable handing your phone over to your partner for them to look at your internet browsing history, or your computer? Or is it something you kind of have to keep covered up in your own life? Things that we have to kind of keep a smaller, contracted, secretive, kind of hiding energy about in our life. It's never a healthy thing, So is it something you have to hide, or is it something, if you're in your bedroom and your partner or your kids walking, that you're startled and you have to change, you have to change what you're doing real quick and click away? And what's the energy around it? Is it a secretive kind of hiding energy? And number three, I'll offer you this is really clear, and this is like so obvious, but is it something you've tried to quit, but you've been unable? Have you told yourself you wanted to quit? Have you said, you know what, I really don't like the way this makes me feel, I think I'm going to stop, but you've kind of experienced this compulsion and you find yourself back in front of that computer or back in front of that phone over and over again, and you don't seem to really have an ability to stop, even though you've maybe made the decision to at some point? Those would be a couple key indicators.
And I suppose it's amazing just so strong coming across there, like such an important conversation. And I suppose, from a partner's perspective, if you're noticing that your partner's being secretive, or noticing that your partner's being withdrawn, or that they're behaving in a strange way, or that they're depleted of energy and they're not being intimate with you, whereas they were before, or those sorts of things are the things to look out for. I know we're going to go on to some tips actually later, but I would like to ask you if, you know, there's parents out there that are potentially listening to this thinking, hang on a minute, I'm wondering now if my teenager or even younger might have an issue with pornography. Like, what are some of the signs that they might be looking out for? Are they kind of similar? Is it that secrecy? Is it that withdrawn from, you know, being social and all that? Is it the same?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a touchy subject, right? Because I mean, the real telltale sign is going to be if you can access your kid's browser or phone history, you know. And I think that's probably a healthy thing to be in touch with in today's modern age. You know, it's like, I know your kids want privacy. It's good to have privacy. There's a degree of that's important, and that trust there. But I think parents being really in tune with what are your kids' online activities, like what's going on, what apps are on their phone, because that's going to be the real telltale sign. You know, it's like kids, you know, being a teen, that's a tumultuous, challenging time for a lot of us. It's an awkward time. So being socially withdrawn, being depressed, that could be a symptom of many things. You know, pornography could be one of them. But I think if you can get access somehow to your kids' browser history, to your kids' phone history, or have some sort of regulations in place that you can kind of keep an eye on that sort of thing, that would be the key indicator. And I would say if your kids are consuming a lot of porn and you know about it, I don't know. My opinion is just that it's just not a good thing. I mean, it's not healthy. Some people might write it off and just say, oh, it's a normal part of being a kid, but it's really not the same. Not with what's available out there on the phones and on the internet today. It's not normal. It's not healthy. That might be a parent's cop out, frankly, to not knowing how or not wanting to deal with it or address it. That's what I would say.
No, really, really good point as well, because actually we've talked about the fact that it might be written off as, oh, that's healthy right now, but then it just grows and grows and grows into something a lot more addictive and a big problem, potentially, most likely.
Also say this, I think I recently had a gentleman on our podcast, and he's a man, he's a leader of a large men's community. He does a lot of work with dads specifically. And he was talking about the conversation that he's having to have with his kids around it. And he's got a great app or a great software on their phones and computers. I think it's called Bark. He highly recommends it, and it notifies the parent of potentially concerning keyword searches. So if it gets talking about being depressed, talking about being suicidal, looking up kind of key sexual terminology, it just notifies the parents and helps keep them abreast of what's going on in their kid's life, so they can have the conversation. I think what's really important is that parents help their kids to kind of normalize the conversation around sex and around porn, and be like, hey, it is a natural curiosity. Of course, like most kids are drawn to this kind of thing. It is normal, but it can be really unhealthy. And one thing we're seeing is younger and younger ages of kids are now experiencing ED, erectile dysfunction, and porn-induced ED and delayed ejaculation issues in the bedroom, younger and younger and younger. We're seeing it now scientifically. So I think this gentleman I had on my podcast, he said, you know what? I have Bark on my phone, on my kid's phone, so I'm able to be aware of what they're viewing. I'm able to address it and kind of normalize the conversation in the home. And I'm also able to have these conversations with my boys, like, hey, you know what? I know this is exciting. I know it's naturally curious. I was there when I was a kid, but like it could be really problematic for you as you're maturing into a young man, as you begin to be maybe potentially intimate with a partner, and it could create real issues for you. And trust me, you do not want to go there as a young man, unable to, I'll use the term perform loosely. You know what I mean? You're excited. You want to connect with your partner, but you can't do that. Man, it's very distressing. So being able to have those real, frank conversations with your kids and about the potential consequences that they can't maybe see, because kids just maybe don't have the ability to regulate that for themselves or see that far down the road, you know.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, Matt. That's brilliant.
So I think we kind of covered some of the questions that we were having.
About how it can impact relationships, some of the negative impacts there we've talked about. what kind of steps, if someone feels that they have an issue with porn, what are some of the kind of basic steps they can start taking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, it's one of those things that it's like, how do I know? I'm going to say if you're listening to this podcast and there are some points that we're touching on here today, and you're like, oh, if I'm being honest with myself, maybe that is me. It does require honesty. It's one of those subjects people don't want to let go of their precious porn. It's one of these things maybe they've had a relationship with for many years. It's been a source of comfort. It's been a source of security. It's been their blanket, their go-to whenever maybe they need to de-stress, or maybe it's like it serves as a form of connection oftentimes for us. So it serves a lot of needs, but the on the other side of that, it really has a lot of potentially negative impacts. So I think what I would say is really it requires the willingness to be honest with yourself and say, hey, maybe there is a correlation here. Maybe I was feeling good for the past couple of days, but I just had a night of binging on the computer, and now I'm not really feeling very good about myself. Maybe now I'm feeling a little bit awkward. I'm feeling a little bit disconnected. I'm feeling a little bit energetically off. So we have to just have this willingness to be honest with ourselves, even though it might not be something we want to confront or address or consider even letting go of. So if that's the case, if maybe you're clear that porn is unhealthy for you, or maybe you suspect it could be, if you're willing to entertain that, I think a great first step is getting yourself into community around the conversation, getting yourself around other men who are having the conversation. Again, we have a support community on Facebook where we've got nearly 1,000 men from around the world having this conversation. And some guys are very honest. Some guys are like, hey, this has been a problem for me for the past 30 years of my life. And just like a community to see that, hey, first of all, I'm not alone. There are other men who are dealing with this. I'm not such a weirdo. I'm not such a creep. It is frankly a normal thing that a lot of men are dealing with. And porn is also one of those things that we often deal with by ourselves. It's a very lonely journey. It's a dark journey. It's something we deal with in the secrecy, in the shadows of life. So if we can create a space for men to come in and, one, recognize they're not alone, but number two would be the next step, is just be able to get into some conversation and discussion around it and get it off your chest and ask some questions and converse with some other men who are on the same path. It's really therapeutic. It's really cathartic. So I think getting into community, and what community can also do is begin to lead you into some supportive and suggestive maybe course of action. Like, all right, what are some steps I can begin to take to begin to eradicate or make some shifts around this? So I think it could offer some great education and training. Community is a great place to start. And what we also offer is the why. Why does it matter? Why is it important? Because if the why is not clear, our community is porn to purpose. So this whole purpose piece is like, what else do you want? If you're willing to be honest with yourself, and you recognize that porn is impacting your relationships, and you're not being intimate with your partner, you're watching porn and you're masturbating throughout the day, and then you get home, and then you're not feeling drawn to connect with your partner, but you desire a healthy connection in your relationship, you desire that intimacy. Well, that's a pretty powerful why. We've got to get clear on the ways that porn is impacting us, and what do we want to be experiencing differently, or what are we willing to commit to? If we want to be able to lead our children, our young boys, in this conversation, well, we have to be in integrity with it in our own lives. If we want to be an example to our daughters, around the men that we want to see in their lives, well, we have to model that in the first place. So that's a pretty powerful why. For me, porn was something that, again, was really, I felt, inhibiting me stepping into greater levels of purpose and service and the calling in my life. And I was like recognizing it was sabotaging me. So I said, I've got to get this dealt with, because, so I think really getting clear on the why is also a really important piece of the puzzle.
It's amazing. It's so powerful. I've got a question here about, so if you're a partner that is potentially seeing some of these signs and feeling quite alienated, feeling quite lonely in how they're experiencing their partner, and suspects that they might be consuming a lot of porn that's causing a lot of negative implications in the relationship. Have you got any tips for how that person might approach the subject with their partner?
Yeah, it's a touchy subject. Again, a lot of men will say, well, let's say we're talking about, a woman or a partner, and then their man is the consumer of pornography. It's a touchy subject because a lot of times men don't want to talk about it. It's their thing. It's like, this is my thing and I want to talk about it. I don't want to let it go. Also, again, oftentimes there's a lot of secrecy and shame around it, so they might not feel comfortable talking about it. But I think the most important thing you can do is get the conversation on the table, and create a safe space for the man to discuss it, to explore, to share it, because porn is one of those things that thrives, I think, in the darkness. And if we have to deal with it by ourselves, if there's secrecy, if there's shame, if there's not a safe space to discuss it, I think it can continue to thrive. So I think really doing your best to create a supportive, loving, understanding environment by which to explore it and share. I think that's a great starting point. Just trying to help the man maybe release some shame around it. But I also think this. I'm not sure exactly where you all go in terms of your support and your guidance to maybe partners in relationship, but also saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to continue to tolerate this. Intimacy is important to me in the relationship, and I see you going over here, and I'm going to make a requirement. I'm gonna, it's important that we have this agreement, understanding a contract in our relationship that says, hey, intimacy is important to me, and I need to be sure that you're making steps in eradicating this from your own life, and really being intentional about focusing that energy here between us and cultivating that healthy connection. And really, I think creating some clear boundaries around what's acceptable within the relationship is really important, and holding firm in that.
It's incredible to hear you say that, because obviously when I was experiencing it, I felt very alone. Like I said, I felt like I did take it very personally. Of course I took it personally, and it's very difficult, like creating that safe space where you can communicate openly. It's quite difficult when you're being triggered and you're feeling like it's quite a personal thing on you. But again, with what you're saying, with hindsight, and I can understand it looking backwards, there is so much shame, and it is in the shadows, and men want to hold on to it. Some men won't want to let go of it. And actually, that's when you set your boundaries down, but feel empowered as a woman to set those boundaries down and say, this is really important to me. But again, like what you're doing with men, but also hopefully with this podcast, is just opening up this conversation to make people feel like it's not alone, whether it's the man or the woman. And it's just really, really important and enlightening to have this conversation with you. It really is.
Indeed. And I'm very appreciative to be sharing here with you today. I just want to offer this. I want to offer a call to the men, a call to the men to step into full responsibility and full accountability in their own lives. Our community, we really emphasize that. Where we focus on the work around the porn and the root relationship and what's really going on there, and we do that deep work. But we're also very much a personal and spiritual development community, and our work is about calling men into the men that they're supposed to be, the leaders that they're supposed to be, the responsibility that they're supposed to that they're called to in their own lives. So oftentimes we see men showing up in there, and they show up in this victim energy, and they show up in this shame cycle. They say, well, I have to go to porn because there's no intimacy in my relationship. But oftentimes they don't recognize that, maybe they've got this porn thing going on, so there's no intimacy, and then so that leads to the porn, and that leads to shame, and it keeps them in this unhealthy cycle. So it's like, men, you've got to take full responsibility, or I invite you to take full responsibility for your relationship and deal with the porn thing and see what shifts are available to you there. Because if you continue to play the victim, if you continue to say, well, I don't have the intimacy in my relationship, so I got to go to the porn. Well, take care of the porn and see what shifts are available to you inside of the relationship, and take ownership of that. And I'm sure that there's something available to you there if you're willing to take ownership.
Oh, I love that, Matt. That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. That is a really powerful point to kind of bring it to a close on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Matt. Can you tell our listeners how they can find out a little bit more about you, how they can join your community if this has really resonated with them?
Yes, thanks so much for that opportunity. So we're getting our website up and running. Primarily, we've really been an online community. On Facebook is where you can find us. So if you go to Facebook and you search Porn to Purpose, you can find our business page there. We also have a private group of nearly 1,000 men. We're about like 960 or so right now, men from around the world. It's a private community called Porn to Purpose. It's a men's only community, and they can join. It's also I do my best to make it a safe community. So I look at all the profiles that come in, make sure it's all real people, and it's a safe space for men to come in and do the work. So we talked about community today, and that being a great first step. We also offer regular training and resources. There's a lot of conversation and community men that are on this path and doing the work, and also the guys that have been successful in this work. You can come there and receive support from them. A lot of our clients and graduates of our program are active members in the community, and they're there to offer support. So check us out on Facebook at Porn to Purpose. The private Facebook community will get you added over there. And if you're looking for more immediate or direct, or maybe you're not really ready to get into community yet, you can send me a direct email at makingpeaceWithPorn@gmail.com, and we can connect and see what we can do to be of support to you at this time. Okay.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you. We'll put that Facebook group into the show notes and your email as well, so people can get in touch from the show notes as well.
The work you're doing, Matt, is really, really important. It really is. So thank you for sharing your light and your gifts and helping men in the way that you are. And conversely, obviously helping relationships and families and everything. It's really, really important work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Claire, James, thanks so much for having me here today. It's been a great conversation, and really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Mwah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You've been listening to the Midlife Mentors with Claire and James Davis.
We'd love to hear from you, so drop us a line at info@themidlifementors.com with any questions or topic suggestions.
And make sure you join us on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. You can find us under the Midlife Mentors.
Yeah.